Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And today we're doing the last chapter of Book 4. Now, and what we're covering is shame, and therefore, but we're going to hit that, the question is, what has been virtue? The whole thing from starting with Book 2, Chapter 7, where he gave kind of a general outline of all what he considered the virtues. Okay, and he gave terms of the characteristics of the virtue between deficiency and extreme. This idea of the mean virtues are mean between excess and defect, and he gave a kind of list of the virtues and vices in that sense, in a general list, which kind of and he spent like a couple chapters dealing with the kind of quick summary of that right at chapter 2:7. Then to the end of 2, which is basically chapter 9, he had 9 chapters, so 7, 8, and 9 fills up the question of virtue. And then he says, well, this has been a general account. And he ends up the chapter 7, books 2, chapter 9 with the kind of saying, well, we're going to go to a more detailed account. First, we're going to talk about what virtues, and then for the first couple chapters of chapter 3, it was him explaining what virtue is, the mean, and then the characteristic question, activity, characteristic, and things like that. And then he gets basically into the starting at chapter 15, no, 10, no, 10, not 10, chapter 5. Chapter 5. After chapter 5, he gives us the starting of virtue, which on chapter 6, 7, 8, and 9, he will address courage and its extremes and excesses. And then 10, 11, and 12, chapter 3, will deal with moderation, sophosune, right? This is, again, pleasure and pain, right? Fear deals with fear, and therefore the reaction, fear of what is painful, right? What is frightful and painful, what you fear. And then the other one is regards to sophosune, is regard to pleasures and pains. These, again, this is, therefore these at 3, when he ends in 3, are the virtues that deal with the pleasures and pain in the body, the lower part of the soul, right? The animal part of the soul. And the next part is the human part of the soul. 4 only deals with human characteristics and traits, and like this. And we'll start with starting with goods, how to deal with goods, and we go from chapter 1, liberality, which deals with the ordinary uses of liberals with good handling of goods. Then 2 is magnificence, which deals with the great things. But then we turn to honor, it flips around, where he deals with the great honors, with magnanimity, or greatness of soul. And then he deals with the question of whether loving honor and not loving honor, right? Which he calls the ambitious person, right? Ambition, and rightful ambition versus wrongful ambition. Then he turns to the question of gentleness, and this is the kind of about anger. How do you address anger? The question of anger, which is tied with human beings being anger. Anger implies something more than a mere animalistic thing. It is an intentionality in it. Okay, this is an intention to be out. Your anger at something. There's a level of intentionality. And then the question of gentleness. And then he goes the general social virtue of friendliness, right? Which he does friendliness, which is chapter 6, 7, and 8 deals with the things. And he ends the last paragraph of chapter 8, as we covered, dealt with kind of a summary of those last 3 chapters. These are the social virtues, these kind of social virtues that it deals with human beings and their relationship with each other in community, as he says, right? So last but not least, now he turns on chapter 9 to something that is not properly, strictly speaking, of virtue, shame. So let's go right to the text as a way of introduction, right? This is chapter 9. It is not fitting to speak about a sense of shame as a particular virtue, for it seems more like a passion than a characteristic. So, first of all, it says shame is more like a passion. Right? It's a passion. It's a reaction. It's a reaction. It's kind of a. It is something. It's kind of a reaction to an emotion. It seems to be an emotion or passion, right? In a sense, right? And reverses a character, something that something that you consider something. A character is what defines you. It's a definition of who you are, what you are. Whereas a passion is a feeling or something activity that you are dealing with, right? So it's more like a passion than a characteristic, right? It is defined at any rate as a certain fear of disrepute. In other words, fear of being not respectable. Okay, fear of disrepute. And it turns out to resemble the fear of terrible things. Remember, all the way to courage. It looks like, remember, courage, the fear of terrible things is the thing that is connected with courage. So that's a fear of disrepute that it resembles to be a fear of something terrible, something like, and those who feel shame blush, and those who fear death turn pale. So, in other words, you fear death, you turn pale. It's a bodily. Something with the body. It has one defeat. What you fear, when you really fear, you fear death, you turn white. Right. But when you're ashamed, you blush. More blood. The red you become red. Right. Um, um, Both then appear in some way to be bodily. It's a bodily reaction, which seems to be more the mark of a passion than a characteristic. Again, because it's tied to the body, and therefore it's characteristic. But this passion is appropriate. Not to every age, but to the young. So it's not something that this passion is an appropriate passion, not to every age, but to the young. For we suppose that the young ought to be bashful because they make error because the many errors they make in living by passion are checked by a sense of shame. So therefore the young, thus, because they make errors about living because of their passions, they make choices because of their passions, and they'll make errors because of the choices, because their passions drive them to make certain choices that are wrong, erroneous, not correct. um, and thus their shamefulness, awareness that what they're doing is wrong, that leads to them have shame, is a kind of correction, right? It's a check. Having shame is a means to check your doing what you will feel shame about, right? So, in other words, in living by their passion, they are checked by a sense. The young are checked by a sense of shame. We praise those of the young who are bashful, but no one would praise an older man because he is given to shame, right? The opposite. We would praise the young who is embarrassed by certain things, but we're not going to praise an older person, an old man, because he is given to shame. We suppose that he ought not to do anything that incurs shame. In other words, in other words, an old person who should know better should not do that. A young person is excusable, but for an old person, no, you're feeling shame. That's blameworthy. There's something blameworthy in that, right? So he ought to do nothing that incurs shame. Shame does not belong to a decent person either, since it occurs in connections with base things. For one must not do such things. So, in other words, you should not do things that you should not do. Shame is associated with the doing of base things, things that you should not do. And a good person, in other words, a decent person, ought not to do such things. Okay? A decent person does not do things you ought not to do. Okay? This person is indecent. The person who does what he ought not to do is indecent. Okay? The decent person does what he ought to do, and has nothing. Should not have any. A decent person should not be embarrassed by what they do. Therefore, they should not incur shame. The young, you can forget. Young, it's acceptable because young shame corrects it. But the question then is, does shame also correct the elderly? Now, he doesn't seem so. He says that if shame does correct it, it says it shows a defect of the character. Okay, it points to a defect of the character. The old in the old. If you have shame in the old, it points to a defect of character. In the young, it's still a defect, but it can be a useful corrective against defect. Okay, but not for the old. Okay, too late for the old. Shame does not belong to a decent person either, since it is, like I said that already, right? Not connected to base, it is connected with base things, and one should not do those things. And whether these are shameful truly or shameful according to opinion makes no difference, for neither is to be done. As a result, one should not feel shame. So, therefore, the question, in other words, the idea is, what about the things that we say? In other words, what truly is shameful versus what people hold to be shameful? And the answer is, it makes no difference. At one level, he says what he says, and whether these are shameful truly or shameful because opinion, true versus opinion doesn't matter, because neither ought to be done. In other words, we shouldn't do what is truthfully shame, or nor should we do what people think are shameful, believe to be shameful. As a result, one should not feel shame, the argument goes, right? One should not. It should not feel shame. You shouldn't feel shame. It's not something that you should do. It is not a sign of this. To be the sort of person to do anything shameful is the mark of someone base. So therefore it points to a base character. So if you're going to do something, if you're feeling shame, it points to there's a defect in your character in that sense. Now, both. The question is, the shame can act as the defect can act as a kind of correction, whereas for the older person, there's no correction. There's no possibility of correction. It shows the character. The young person's character is not yet formed, that they could get happy. In other words, the sense of shame can lead them to avoid doing things, and by avoid doing things, they can get the habit of not doing them. And then that defines, in other words, character is defined by habit over time. And then what happens is that habit becomes so enriched, it becomes a second nature, becomes your character in that sense. So therefore, that the young person, the shame can act as a corrector that habituates you not to do the shameful things. And then as you get, and it becomes, as the habit of not doing those things develop over time, it becomes your second nature, and you don't think about doing those things, right? That is why it works that way. Whereas the older person who has not been so habituated, and their nature is that they still feel shame about it. Okay, it's good they feel shame about it because it's better than the shameless, but but it's still a defect. It's not something praiseworthy in that sense. It's not something. It's because it points that there's a defect in your character. And the sort of person, and to be the sort of person to do anything shameful, is the mark of someone who is base. Of someone base. In other words, that if you're the sort of person to do anything that is shameful, either of opinion, what people believe to be base, hold to be base, the opinion of those. In other words, what is truly shameful versus what opinion holds to be shameful. Both of those, doesn't matter which. You shouldn't do either in that sense. Uh, 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 this implies that if you are doing those things and feel that sense of shame, you are someone who is base, or uh, uh, base again is literally ekalos. I'm not ignoble or unbeautiful, right? Base. But to be disposed to feel shame at doing such things, but to be disposed to feel shame at doing such things, and on this account, To suppose that one is decent is strange. In other words, to feel shame and to think it's strange for you to think that you should feel shame and that you think you're decent. On this account, that believe that you're decent. In other words, it's something strange to believe that while you're feeling shame, this proves you're decent. No, it doesn't prove you're decent. It means that there's a problem. For shame attaches to voluntary acts. But the decent person will never voluntarily do base things. So the question of in other words, you may be embarrassed. There's a difference. In other words, if you do something involuntary, you may be embarrassed by it, but it's not shame. Whereas if to be shame is to know, it is knowing that that you chose to do something that you should not have done. You're in error. In other words, you made a wrong choice. You made an erroneous choice. You chose poorly or chose wrongly. And therefore, by choosing wrongly, you're not just embarrassed, you're not only embarrassed. Shame is kind of an embarrassment, but it's also a sense of guilt about it. You really feel guilty about it. It's not just embarrassment, because now the question is that when, let's say, you did something involuntary, something that you didn't voluntarily do, but you then feel shame about it. That's a little too much. You can be embarrassed by it, but you don't feel guilty. So I wish I didn't do it, but I couldn't help it. I didn't choose to do it. It happened, right? That's an embarrassment about this. So the decent person will never voluntarily do a base thing, and yet a sense of shame might be a decent thing on the basis of a given hypothesis, an argument hypothesis. In other words, it might be a decent thing on a positive. If a person were to do something base, he would feel shame. That's the idea. Therefore, it is again hypocrisy. In other words, this is the hypocrisy. That if I feel shame about it, at least I know that it's wrong, right? That I'm doing something. This is like hypocrisy is the compliment vice pays the virtue, right? That's the Chateaubriand's line, right? Well, the same thing. Shame. I realize if I feel shame, I know I did something wrong. So if a person were to do something base or wrong, he would feel shame. But this does not pertain to virtues. Again, does not pertain to virtues. If shamelessness or not being ashamed to do shameful things is base, truly base, it is still no more the case that he who is ashamed to do these sort of things is decent. In other words, you're not decent. In other words, it's not you're decent. You're just better. You're not decent, but you're better than the shameless. In other words, not better. You're less bad. Okay, that's the less bad argument, not better. Because you say better, you assume the best, right? He's less bad. He's less bad than the shameless. The person who feels no shame about doing base and shameful things, this is really bad. This is really bad. But the fact that you feel shame doesn't make you decent. It makes you just less bad than the shameless one. Now, last sentence, he goes, self-restraint is not self-restraint. Now, self-restraint, this is shame, but now self-restraint is not a virtue either. So therefore, something's wrong. Self-restraint. In other words, I know I want to do it, but I'm going to fight against it. Right? This is self-restraint. This is something that we'll deal with it later. Right? He says, self-restraint is not a virtue either, but something mixed. Yet concerning it will be pointed out in what comes later. Now, 940, and this is book 7, chapters 1 through 10. This is what accuracy, in that sense, the idea of this self-restraint. In other words, I know something's wrong. I'm going to restrain. And the whole discussion of book 7, chapters 1 through, it's interesting because it says 1 through 10. Chapter 7 has 14 chapters. So Um, it deals with the first 10 chapters of book 7. And then, but he's, therefore, it's interesting. He says self restraint, but I'm going to talk about it not next book. First, it says, but now let us speak about justice. He now then speaks about justice. Now, he admits that this is not a virtue. This is like, why isn't shame brought up later? Why is shame brought up at the discussion of virtue? Why is shame brought up here? Because in the other things we felt shame. In other words, in response to the vices that we've had, shame is a characteristic of both the boastful, every characteristic of excess, right? If you're in the excess, or in other words, if you're in the excess or defect, you're not committing the mean, you're aware of it. If you're aware you're doing it, and this is still another choice of trying, there's shame is playful. That you're doing something that you know is wrong, that is an error, and that you know it is an error, and you have shame about it, then you were aware that it was an error. You know what is good, but you don't do you have not done it. Whereas the shameless person doesn't know that they might be in a situation where they don't even either know or they don't care whether they're doing the bad thing. Okay, so they're either ignorant through ignorance or through that they are evil. The ignorant person, we can forgive them. They're just ignorant. That's the whole discussion earlier in book. That whole question of at the beginning of book 3 about the voluntary and involuntary character of things, right? Again, this is why it ends. It gives us a nice point that shame is that moment where we address the question of the voluntary, the purely voluntary awareness that you did something wrong. You erred. He doesn't hit the involuntary, which I talked about embarrassed. You feel embarrassed by it, right? But shame is that it was a choice that you made and you did it voluntarily, and that you know it's wrong, right? And that's the thing it is. And therefore, it is shame is being better than shameless, better but less bad than shameless. But it's shameless is the worst. It is the extreme. But is there a and there's no median here. It's because the median is doing not doing it, doing what is right, doing the right thing. Where shame is a reaction of being in error, not doing what is right, but doing what is indecent, not doing what is decent, not doing what is right, not doing what is uh, 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 the mean, the right action to do. It is error. It is not correct behavior. It is error, erroneous behavior. It is it is not good, not decent, not noble. It is the opposite. It's indecent, ignoble, base. And then the next chapter, he ends it on the last time. Now let us speak about justice. And at book 5, our next chapter will focus wholly on the question of justice. So let's stop here. You have any comments, questions, or things like that, please put them below. And as I see them, we'll answer them. If you like the chapter, please like it. Liking it, hit the like button helps the algorithm. So please hit the like button if you liked it. Share your video wide. Share it on social media. Share it with others. Get it out there to get people to know about it, because that helps to get more people to come to see the chapter. Helps to spread the news about the channel thing. If you've not subscribed, please do subscribe. This would be a good thing to do. The subscription helps us grow the channel. The next thing you can do is, if you didn't like it, okay, you can say, "No, I didn't like it for some reason," but say why. Say why, so people can learn from your criticism. Okay, that's how you can do it. Now, the other thing you do is you can follow me on social media. The links are below. Another thing you do is you want to find out more about me as a scholar and a researcher. The academic social media links are below, so you can go see my scholarship and my research stuff. Another thing you can do is you want to help me to do what I do. Now, of course, you can always go to my social media, my academic social media, find my university email address, and send me a Google card or something like that, a Google card or an Amazon card or something like that. In one of those ways, it helps. That everything can, all these things would be useful. And that's I don't. I'm not. My channel's not big enough that I have a tip jar. Okay. That's why it's just having more people help to get the chip jar. Because I'm that sidewalk. I'm the sidewalk academic teacher who goes out there in the street pairing my. I was saying, because that's the problem. I Patreon, and you want to help me, you can do so also by Patreon or Subscribe Star. But the people in there, they say, "But you're not doing special things for us. So what are you? Why should we contribute something and you're not doing this something? I'm just subscribed." This is the way you can do it. You want to, this is the tragedy of the commons, right? I'm giving this, you're giving away for free, so why should we pay anything? Okay, I understand. This is, and by the way, it's not really worth anything. Oh, if it was worth something, more people would watch it, and blah blah blah. Okay, that's the whatever. Okay, quit whining. I quit whining. You're saying, okay, yes, I understand. But if you want to help me to do what I do, you can do so through. Want to contribute? You can do so through Subscribe Star or Patreon. Links are below. Or another way you can help is buy one of my books. Okay, you can buy my books. Particularly if you know someone who is going to be studying Aristotle's politics, might be interested. They can buy any of those books through either your local bookstore or ordering it through your local bookstore or ordering it through an online server like Barnes& Noble or Amazon. Or if you want to order the notebook for Aristotle's Politics, if you're a student studying Aristotle's Politics and would like a guide to go through studying the politics as a kind of hand-on guide, like a teaching guide, going through it and going through the text, helping you through the text to study it, read the notebook for Aristotle's Politics, published by Lulu. And if you buy it directly by Lulu, I get the profit that the bookstores will get. So that's the way you can do it. Okay, that's it. Next time we see us, we turn to chapter 5, book 5, sorry, chapter 1, which deals with the question of justice. That's it. Take care and bye-bye and so long. Have a good one.